We'll be starting in about 2 minutes. Thank you.
How are you feeling?
Morning. Better.
Better?
Not 100%.
But not, shall I keep my distance?
Very
Morning, Seb. I think we're starting. If everyone has... Good morning, good morning. I didn't... Does everyone have a headset? I hope you do. What do we need to press? You hold down the button, don't you, to turn it on? I think that... Why am I saying that into the microphone? Anyone? Okay, good. I think we're up and running. Can anyone hear? Martina can't hear. It's important that Martina can hear to tell me what I'm getting right and what I'm getting wrong. Okay, good. We set. Can you hear us? Good. Well, I didn't know I was. I feel like I was late for my own party now that I find that I was opening this event. So, sorry about that. So we've had a busy couple of weeks. So well done to everyone who's still standing, especially those who arrived right at the start in week one. If you haven't succumbed to COVID or the colds that are going around or whatever, then I think that's already a victory. But let's hope that the last couple of days are full of successes and reasons for inspiration. So I was thinking about what I could say today that would add anything to what we've heard in the last couple of weeks. And I guess the point for me is that we talk a lot about the food systems approach and all of these co-benefits that we're going to find. But what does that really mean? How can we do that as our respective organizations and, of course, as countries? And I thought that the best way to illustrate that would be to talk through a bit of what GAIN has been doing over the last few years, which I think represents what we see other organizations could be doing and how we can approach this challenge. So a few things. First, just to go back for anyone who doesn't know GAIN, and sorry, I didn't introduce myself, Oliver Camp from GAIN, Environment and Food Systems Advocacy Advisor. So back in 2002, when GAIN was formed, it was very much a nutrition-focused organization working on fortification and direct nutrition interventions. I can't take any credit for that. I was at primary school at the time. But between 2002 and 2016, that was kind of the approach. But then I think things started to change. We got a new executive director, and we really build up to 2021 and the UN Food Systems Summit. And that's really where I want to kick this off. So first thing, UN Food Systems Summit, that really put the food systems approach on the map. Countries were really starting to develop their food systems pathways, and that brought new attention and new momentum behind this idea that the food system is the place to work. And so after that, in 2022, we launched a program called Nourishing Food Pathways, which has this huge component around food policy. And that's kind of the topic for the morning. And we're going to hear a lot about the great work that other organizations are doing in this space. But I just wanted to touch on a few areas that we work on. So firstly, translating those pathways into action plans. We've heard that a lot this week, but we as an ecosystem need to be working on the real practical, tangible translation of those pathways into action plans. And part of that is very unglamorous. It's the coordination, it's the governance mechanisms, it's the working together across government, which is what we talk about so much when we talk about food systems for climate, for biodiversity, for nutrition. And I just wanted to touch on a couple of tools that might be useful to think about. The food systems dashboard that we launched a couple of years ago, which is a tool to bring enough data into the decision-making process. The dashboard is an amazing tool, and now we have sub-national dashboards as well to help countries to diagnose and to understand what's going on in their food systems and where they need to intervene. We have the 3FS tool that many of you will be familiar with, financing for food systems, which is about looking at how much money there is going into the food system so that we can understand where the shortfalls are, where we need to invest more. And now we have a policy coherence tool, which is very relevant to what we're talking about today, which is a sort of self-assessment of different synergies and trade-offs within the food systems decision-making process. So why am I bringing all this up? Well, because I think we need to be, as a community, coordinating in the way that we ask governments to coordinate. We need to be thinking about what it really means to work in this cross-sectoral and multifaceted way. And then we launched ICANN, and we're going to hear about ICANN, I'm sure, from Deputy Director Nancy Aburto of FAO, who we work very closely with on this. The thing about ICANN, the Initiative on Climate Action and Nutrition, is that it connects across these agendas. It was a COP27 initiative, and it helps us to understand where are the nutrition-sensitive interventions, the biodiversity-sensitive interventions within the climate space. Where can we look for co-benefits between nutrition and climate? And so I'll leave it to Nancy to say more, but I think that's a really critical piece of this coordinated effort. And then, of course, last year we had the declaration, the Technical Cooperation Collaborative, which not only brings together the topic matter, the concept of working across all of these different areas, but it brings together organizations doing this in a more coordinated way. So for anyone not familiar, the 12 founding members of the Technical Cooperation Collaborative have been working hard for the last year to support countries on the implementation of the declaration. And I think we should hear a lot more about that at COP30 in Brazil. And then the bit that I just want to sort of focus on for a second is that we need to practice what we preach, and we need to show how this can work. So sitting behind the policy work that many of us are doing, and that certainly GAIN is doing under Nourishing Food Pathways, we have examples of how this works, how this all stitches together through the programmatic work that we do. So we have these programs on things that you'll be familiar with: social protection, fortification, biofortification, workforce nutrition, young people and infant nutrition. And I think as we add up all of these different components, the policy, the finance, the programmatic interventions, we build evidence, we build case studies, we build examples, and we show that this food systems transformation thing, it's not just a buzzword, it's not just a phrase we like to use for 2 weeks a year at COP. It's something that is happening all the time that countries can work on through all of these different initiatives, all of these different supporting organizations that we see here. So I've jumped straight into detail because I really want to get down to the brass tacks. We talk a lot about what we want to see. We talk about long-term aspirational outcomes for the food system. We talk about where we need to be by 2030, 2050, and so on. But what more is there to say? Well, we have a huge role to play as the ecosystem of support to work with countries. And we still have a long way to go. We know that a lot of indicators are still going in the wrong direction, some kind of flat or going slightly in the right direction. But in many ways, we have new challenges, new hurdles, new barriers to overcome. And I think that this session today will be a great opportunity to hear from organizations that are working out how to overcome those barriers, the broken economics of our food systems, the cascading crises, the conflicts, and the other things I could mention to depress us all very much. So I think it won't be a depressing session. I think it will be an uplifting session because of all the great work that's happening in this space. We have a great panel that I think I'm handing over to Glyndis to introduce. And I hope that we can just get into the detail that perhaps we all need to feel gives us something practical and pragmatic to work on as we go home and get back to work after COP. So that's it from me. Thank you. Glyndis, over to you.
Thank you so much, Oliver. I hope you guys can hear me because I cannot hear myself, so now it's a strange experience. Good morning, everyone. Once again, I'm Glyndis Virginia Luciano. You probably know me from the Action on Food Hub, but in my day-to-day, I actually work for EIT Food, which is the European Institute for Innovation and Technology Food. Now, we're going to start with the first panel. I will ask you, all the panelists, one by one to come up as I call your name so everyone knows exactly who you are. But here we're going to hear about policy recommendations or initiatives that support climate change mitigation and adaptation while protecting biodiversity. We're actually going to start, I'm going to mention who everyone is. We have Martina Flankenstein from the World Wildlife Fund International. A round of applause, please, as our panelists are coming up. We have Sebastian Osborne from Mercy for Animals. We have Netzai Norris Mudeke. And then Chiara Cristina Colombo from the International Water Management Institute. I love the clapping. Good job. This is the last day. Now, we're going to hear from you guys on different initiatives, recommendations as well of the work that you're doing. But we're actually going to start with a short presentation from Martina to really set the scene. So, Martina, over to you.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Glyn. I always just to see. Okay, it works. Yeah, good morning also from my side. I'm Martina Fleckenstein with WWF International, and I'm leading the policy work. And this one focus of my area is really the integration of food and agriculture in global agendas. And this means in the global biodiversity framework and the CBD, the Biodiversity Convention. It's in the Land Convention, the desertification, and we are here. It's about integration, food and agriculture in the climate agenda. And in this context, we have started our journey some years back, where we really wanted to know and to see how food and agriculture is integrated in the nationally determined contributions. And when we started this 2022, we realized there are huge gaps, especially if we talk about a systemic approach. So there is, or there was, or there still is in the NDCs, a lot on the production. But if you look on the supply chain, if you look on food loss and waste, and especially if you look on diets and nutrition, it's going to nearly zero. So in an analysis we have done some years back, it was 5 NDCs who mentioned diets, and we have updated this, and now it's 9 NDCs out of all the NDCs who are mentioning diets. So there is a huge gap. And knowing this, we talked to those people who are writing the NDCs, the NDC facilitator, the ministries, and they said, yes, there is a knowledge gap. And based on this, then we have started to develop this interactive NDC guidance tool. And you see here on the website, it's a very easy to handle tool. It has a landing page where you get information about the NDCs. And then it has 5 intervention areas. And within the intervention areas, we offer about 30 policy measures. And especially the policy measures are of huge importance for the member states, because the first step is the NDC in general, but the second step is really to work on the action plans. And also in the discussion we had these days with governments, they really want to again confirmed how important it is to get ideas what means the action on the ground. And I really want to encourage you, have a look on this. There is a barcode, and I also have some small cards. And what we have done also is having, and I have my next slide, here you see, that you get on the landing page, you get the intervention area, then you get on the policy options, and finally each of the policy options gives you information about the implementation measures, about co-benefits, challenges. Also we had a look on the trade-offs, which is always important. If possible, information about costs, about policy monitoring tools, and also case studies, and some of the pages even have small videos to explain. So it's really easy handling. It's at the moment in 3 languages, English, Spanish, and French. And we fortunately yesterday get from ICA the Portuguese, so we will also have it in Portuguese, hopefully in the next 1 or 2 weeks. So it's really, we want to use this in all languages. And what we have also done, we have done a broad outreach. I think it's important not just having something on the internet, but we have really worked with the NDC partnership very closely. We have run together with the NDC partnership webinars for the facilitator and focal points, and also we are at the moment in the process to have in-person workshops, dialogues where we go on the ground and work for 2 or 3 days with government, but also with stakeholder on figuring out which of the 30 options are relevant for a country, and especially which one they want to follow up and have a deeper dive. The second thing, and this is just a short snapshot, as I mentioned, we have done an analysis 2022, and we have done this analysis, just a very quick one, for where we are today. There is a slightly increase on, especially also on food loss and waste, but as you see, the diets is still something where there is a huge gap. And I also want to recommend another analysis of the NDCs, which was launched these days by FAO, which gives a very, very detailed also analysis about mitigation, adaptation measures, and these things. And finally, we also have, we call it a toolkit, which is a compilation of NDC's measures, but also of NDC examples. We have started with the toolkit for COP28, which was on agriculture and food, and for this COP we have extended this, integrating biodiversity and freshwater. And what's also important that it's a publication at the FAO website. As you see, we're also always doing this together with our partner, but it gives a lot of examples, it gives a lot of background information. So what we really want to help member states, those who have now the task to develop the updated NDCs, and there is an urgency. Officially it had to be done by end of February, but you know how it works, it will be probably longer. We really hope to have the figures I've shown you in the previous one, that it's not 5 on diets, but it is 100 on diets, the same for the others. And I think the moment is now, because we set the path for the next 5 years until 2030, and that's important to keep in mind with all the updating of the NDCs. And this is also just to show where we also have in this publication some ideas for good practice examples. I think this is more or less my last slide. What I also want to mention, we are talking here about the climate, but we are also starting to work on how to integrate food and agriculture stronger in the 23 targets from the Global Biodiversity Framework. So we also try to look for alignment, because the third thing is, or very important, is to get out of the silo thinking. And there is, if you talk about finance, the finance sources, for example, for restoration, it contributes to the biodiversity framework, it contributes to climate, and it contributes to land. So there is always these linkages and alignment, and we have started the work in Cali to work on a guidance for NBSAPs as a national biodiversity strategy and action plans, and that's also something we continue to work, and we're really looking for alignment, because if we don't align, we will never end on the implementation on the ground, because that's the most important thing. Having all these measures on the paper in NDC or in NBSAPs doesn't mean that it's implemented on the ground. And at the end, we will not solve the big problems of climate change, biodiversity, food security and land degradation if we integrate food and agriculture in all these agendas, and especially in the implementation. So, and I hope I've kept my 5 minutes you gave me.
Thank you so much, Martina. Now, actually, I was going to ask you if you had a QR code to share with everyone. So here it is. Now, on alignment and trying to break silos as well, we're going to pass it over to Sebastian. Can you share a little bit on how you can integrate food and agriculture strategies into NDCs, and how that can actually also help countries achieve their climate goals? Over to you, Sebastian.
Absolutely, and good morning all, and I'm Sebastian Osborne with Mercy for Animals, and I'm looking forward to talking about the opportunity that this round of NDCs provides for countries to integrate robust food systems action. With increasing food demands from a global growing population, with reduced productivity under climate change, and crucially with current dietary trends, there's a need to transform how we our approach to producing, processing, distributing, consuming, and wasting food in order to protect climate, people, and nature. At the production stage, there are many opportunities to reduce impacts on climate and ecosystems. In fisheries, for example, rates of bycatch and discard vary widely between types of fishing gear that can be used for the same target species. In terrestrial systems, practices such as better nutrient management can reduce impacts of farming on ecosystems. Most climate action to date has focused on the production stage, but there's much more that needs to be done even at this stage and throughout the food system, and more finance to enable this. We also need careful consideration of the intermediary stages. Policy action on food distribution, for example, is essential to avoid food insecurity resulting from climate shocks. But where I want to focus most today is where we see the biggest gap in action, which is at the consumption stage. That's diets and food waste. This stage is critical because what we consume determines what and how much we produce, and different foods differ vastly in their contribution to health as well as in their impact on animals, ecosystems, land, water, and our climate. For terrestrial systems, for example, the main impact of food systems on biodiversity occurs through land conversion, a large portion of which is to grow crops for animal feed. Producing a kilo of protein from poultry, for example, requires on average close to 15 times as much land as is needed to produce a kilo of protein from peas. Such differences add up. As the IPCC noted in their special report on climate change and land, if the current US dietary pattern was adopted globally, this would require nearly double the world's habitable land area. Similarly, for aquatic food systems, fishing is the primary driver of marine biodiversity loss, and excessive consumption in some parts of the world, such as the EU, for example, or other high-income countries, or fishing to produce feed for carnivorous aquaculture, has resulted in harm to ecosystems, as well as to the food security of vulnerable populations. Food is important for a variety of reasons, in addition to climate and nature, in particular nutrition and health, but the core shifts we need to see in consumption to protect the environment, principally reducing the overconsumption of animal products in high-income countries in particular, reducing food waste, and increasing the amount of fruits, vegetables, and legumes globally effectively supports benefits to nature, climate, and nutrition. These shifts have the potential to free up billions of hectares for nature-positive use, such as rewilding, restoration, and natural carbon sequestration. In oceans, reducing the vast extraction of fish from the waters, as well as other marine species, for consumption and feed would allow populations to recover and increase their contributions to the natural carbon cycle. Fortunately, there are many policy options that can be integrated into NDCs to support these shifts. Mercy for Animals is proud to be a member of World Federation for Animals, which has just launched a policy toolkit to support countries in their NDCs called Animals for Climate Action. This toolkit contains multiple measures, both for production and consumption. For example, at the consumption stage, the measure on introducing school and institutional programs outlines the potential for programs in schools, hospitals, and other government institutions to serve sustainable plant-based meals in line with planetary boundaries, as has been successfully implemented in cities like Salvador, Bergamo, and Copenhagen. We've seen an increasing focus in the UNFCCC process on the importance of addressing food systems in full, as shown, for example, by the COP28 Declaration on Food and Agriculture. And we hope that we'll see parties follow up on this by taking strong action to support plant-based food systems in their upcoming NDCs. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sebastian. Now, we're actually going to hear from a more on-the-ground perspective after you've both, set the stage. We're going to hear from Natsai, who has been working with the Zambian government on climate-resilient aquaculture. And so we would love to hear how you've been supporting with creating the policy pathways.
Thank you very much. My name is Netsai Mudege. I'm based in Zambia, working with World Fish, but also collaborating with government of Zambia. When we look at Zambia, in relation to climate, some of the future trends include higher temperatures, decrease in rainfall, and heavy rainfall events. So when we look at these three things, they all have very huge adverse impacts on fisheries and aquaculture. So FAO, World Fish and partners developed some guidelines on how to integrate blue foods or aquatic foods into NDCs. So I find these guidelines to be quite timely. They focus on about, I think, 5 key pillars, which include capture fisheries productivity, aquaculture productivity, looking at the supply chains, looking at consumption and diets, which my colleagues have also talked about briefly, looking at the enabling policy, which also includes finance measures, and also looking at the blue foods and blue carbon. So when we look at these key issues, I think they are quite relevant to the work that we are doing in Zambia, and can also help Zambian governments and also other governments to integrate aquatic foods into NDCs. When we look at Zambia, we are mainly focusing on adaptation, looking at increased fisheries productivity, looking at resilience and reduced vulnerability. How is this being done? Mainly, we have a lot of challenges in terms of access to quality seed, in terms of access to quality feed, in terms of access to training and information for farmers and extension officers and so on. So as World Fish, in collaboration, of course, with the Zambian government, we have a number of projects which are focusing on improving hatchery systems in Zambia so that we can have access to quality seed, which are also focusing on improving access to feed. When we look at aquaculture, we know that 60% of the cost of aquaculture are related to feed. So feed is quite expensive, and many farmers may not be able to have access to that feed. So we are also promoting other technologies such as integrated agriculture, aquaculture systems, integrating with animals such as, of course, goats or chickens, and also integrating with vegetables and so on, which also promote efficient use of water. Like I said, we are having a decrease in rainfall, so we need to be able to use our water in a more efficient way. We have also been focusing on sustainable fisheries. So by sustainable fisheries, the government has been also mainly focusing on fisheries management, putting up protected zones, working with resource committees in communities that can then help to manage whatever fisheries we have. There's also been a lot of work that is now currently going on early warning systems. The challenge that we have been having in Zambia, particularly for aquaculture and fisheries, is that we didn't have early warning systems targeted towards that sector. Most of the advisories that exist in Zambia focus on crops, because I think crops such as maize are like the staple, so they are like of national importance. So when we discussed with aquaculture farmers and also in fishers as well, they mentioned that they needed also to have access to climate advisories which address their needs. So as World Fish, we were a catalyst to bring different government departments together, particularly the Zambia Meteorological Department and also the Fisheries Department, the Agricultural Department and so on, to come together so that they could also have a discussion about how do we then integrate fisheries into the climate advisories. So I'm happy to say the first climate advisory that included fisheries was issued in August of this year. This is a very important development because due to increases in heavy winds and cyclones coming from Mozambique and so on into Zambia, what we have also seen is a large number of fishermen dying on the lake because they don't know that there's going to be strong winds there on the lake, and then they end up capsizing and dying there. So these climate advisories are actually very, very important in terms of adaptation. World Fish is also developing an aquaculture advisory tool, which is an algorithm to, like, if the temperatures fall below a certain point, farmers were supposed to do A, B, C, and D. And we are also using a USSD protocol so that even if you don't have access to a smartphone, you are still able to get the advisories if your phone number is registered. What we have also seen is that a lot of these climate advisories are also in English, and many of our, for example, women in rural communities, they can read in local language but not necessarily in English. So we are also now trying to promote some of these climate advisories to be issued in local language. And I'm also happy to say that the Zambian government now translates to about 7 local languages, but more can be done because there are also many, many local languages, but of course we are limited in terms of the budgets that are available. So when we look at like I said, the focus in the NDCs has been mainly on adaptation. There has been very little discussed in terms of the role that fisheries can play in terms of mitigation as well. So I think there's a lot of work that can be done in Zambia along that lines for mitigation. Zambia is strategically positioned because 40% of the fresh water of Southern Africa is found in Zambia. Zambia has got a lot of huge lakes, and as we know that lakes, when they are like living lakes, they have their fish biomass, they have aquatic plant species and so on. They can play a very, very big role in terms of sequestering carbon. And this discussion is not there. What the discussion that is there is discussion about soil carbon, how we can sequester soil through, in agriculture and so on, maybe through also forestry. So money is going to forestry and agriculture, but this huge resource, which are the lakes that we have, there isn't much going on in there. And particularly in the north, we are now having a problem in that those lakes have also been overfished. So their potential for sequestering carbon has also been quite dramatically reduced. So we need to be working on increased biodiversity for aquatic animals and plant species so that we can also promote carbon sequestration. My colleagues have also talked about the issue of food waste and loss. Fish is a very perishable commodity. And as I have said that in Zambia, one of our major issues that we are going to experience is increased or rise in temperatures, which is also going to increase the food loss and waste. So usually what our fishermen do and fisher folks, they process their fish using these traditional methods, which are like the traditional kilns, which use a lot of firewood and charcoal. And also a lot of fish is being lost through, rotting or also getting molds and other things. So as World Fish and also the government of Zambia, we have been promoting green climate smart processing technologies such as the solar tent dryers, smoking kilns that are modernized so that they can use less firewood and so on, and also reduce contamination for the fish, because if the fish is wrongly processed, even the nutrient quality also goes down. So we are trying to cover some of those areas. So I think, that's all I can say for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We have to leave something for the Q&A. A round of applause, please. Thank you for providing such a great example of how Zambia is trying to really work on and making sure that aquaculture in the country is resilient, and at the same time making sure that people are not being left behind. Producers are important, and the role that you guys are also taking in combating food waste as well as much as possible. And now we're actually going to hear from CGIAR, who's going to share, if I'm not mistaken, a bit more on the water resilience tracker. So over to you, CGIAR.
Thank you so much and good morning. Thank you for having me. I'm one of the victims of a cold, so apologies for the voice. So the water resilience tracker really starts from the point that if climate action needs to be active, our main objective is to acknowledge the role that water plays through co-benefits and trade-offs. So I've listened a lot to the word co-benefits and trade-offs throughout the event, and I also thank other panelists that already mentioned the role that water plays. So the water resilience tracker was designed by Agua, the Alliance for Global Water Adaptation. So already had done phase 1 and is now expanding to a phase 2 with new partners, one of which is IMI, International Water Management Institute, ARUP, Agua again, and Deltares. And it's really a diagnostic tool for countries in supporting countries so that they recognize the role that water plays when they have to design their national commitments. In the first phase, we were more looking at NDCs and how NDCs also translate in national frameworks or water governance plans. But now we're also expanding that vision. We have new partners, and so we are trying also to have more meaningful relationship with countries. So I have to say, first of all, this is a country demand-driven process. So they have to come to us and they have to share that they are interested for us to come there and work with them. We are now also looking at how we can also bring ministries together so that we take in place and we really acknowledge those co-benefits and trade-offs. In some countries where we already implemented phase 1, we're also looking more at subnational, also how this translates in subnational plans. There are some countries that are very active in local adaptation plans. So that's truly a new way of looking at adaptation. We know now that the negotiations are a little bit complicated when it comes to the global goal on adaptation and how you link, the global aspect to the local one. So those local adaptation plans can also be a solution to that, and how those link to the more national plan. We're also looking at how, obviously, it's very obvious that the water plays a critical role in adaptation, but it does also in mitigation. So we're also looking at the role of mitigation. There's also a brief that was launched here. The Water Resilience Tracker is also under a bigger program, FCDO funded, that is called the JTWS, Just Transitions on Water Security. The other work streams are the Fair Water Footprint, Water Resilience Tracker, and the Resilient Water Accelerator. So those 3 streams look at different things. So the Water Resilience Tracker, as I said, look at climate planning and how that is translated on the ground. The Resilient Water Accelerator, in a way, is a catalyzer for finance for water projects. And then Fair Water Footprint looks more at the private sector and the role and the relationship with communities. So in a way, there is this way of having a sort of a whole of society approach. So that we don't have, we have something that is meaningful, and we are going to work on some countries together, the 3 work streams. So that's also interesting. It's a new way of doing things. So it's also interesting to see how what will be the results and the impacts on the ground. Another thing I wanted to add is, so IMI was also involved in, so this is besides the Water Resilience Tracker, we're also involved last year with one of the main COP28 outcomes on water resilience food systems. So the first water high-level ministerial was held last year through the presidents, through the role and the leadership of the COP28 presidency, and we also played a role there. So we're also working with, we had a closed meeting yesterday with more than 12 countries to work with them and look at what are the ways, and maybe I see also some maybe collaborations. So how if we link those sectors together. So what the water community, I think sometimes we talk a different language and we need to come together and really speak to each other. For instance, in the international processes, I don't think we manage to infiltrate those processes well enough, and I think we should be better in doing that. So I wanted to bring some. So the result, we just started in the second phase, so the results will be in the next years. But we're already talking to countries that will be interested, and I know that, for instance, for Brazil, we already did the first phase, and we will be doing a second phase now, looking more also, they're also interested in seeing the role of transboundary and how transboundary enters the picture, and also subnational implementation of these climate plans. Oh, okay, that's it. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Chiara. And also thank you for highlighting where there's already opportunities for synergies. I think, if anything, I think this COP has really highlighted the importance of us learning how to speak more or less the same language, or at least break down the language that we think we're all speaking. And at the same time, aligning more, reaching out to different, do more cross-sectorial work as well. So thank you for highlighting that. Now, we're going to be merging the Q&A because due to interest of time. So I will be handing it over to my next co-moderator, Joanna, who's the Director of Institutional Partnerships at ProEdge International. I will kindly ask you to go back, but please make sure that you've written down your questions. You'll get to ask them at the end. And thank you so much to our panelists. Now, yes.
Sorry, I just 1 second. I just got a message from my colleague that in the final paper of the NCQG, food is not mentioned. So if anybody of you has a chance to influence this decision paper and bring food in this decision, he just was messaging me that this time food is not mentioned, and I think it would be good to have also food somewhere in the NCQG.
Thank you, Martina. We were hoping this was going to be an uplifting situation, but you see, there's some things out of our control at the moment. So, Joanna, over to you.
Thank you so much, Glyndis. Good morning, everybody. My name is Joanna Truan, and I'm the Director of Partnerships at ProEdge International. We're a food organisation working to transform the global food system toward a more plant-rich food system. And we're collaborating with the IT Food to coordinate the Action on Food Hub here at COP29. So we've heard some fabulous insights from that first panel on how to really harvest change for more sustainable food systems regarding climate and biodiversity solutions. And we're now privileged to welcome a second expert panel, really looking in detail at some concrete examples and case studies from food systems that are implementing these solutions. So I would like to welcome first to the stage Mr. Malang Darboe, who is the Deputy Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Fisheries and Water Resources of the Gambia. Everyone please welcome Mr. Darboe. Thank you. And now I'd like to welcome, please, Nancy Aburto, the Deputy Director of the Food and Nutrition Division at the Food and Agriculture Organization. Please give Nancy a welcome. Thank you. Thirdly, I'd like to welcome John Soo Shin, who is the Regional Director for Asia at the International Rice Research Institute. Welcome. And finally, I'd like to please welcome Richard Ali, the Director of Corporate Affairs Strategy and Stakeholder Relations at Tetra Pak. Welcome to Richard. So as you can see, we've got a very diverse panel representing different parts of the world, different sectors, and we are going to be hearing from them on the work they are all doing to transform the food system. So, Mr. Darboe, I'm going to come to you first, please. And the Gambia is a beneficiary of a Green Climate Fund project valuing $25 million US, focused on fisheries. So could you please tell us more about how this initiative is transforming aquatic food systems in the country, and specifically how it is contributing to biodiversity conservation and enhancing the resilience of local communities to climate change? Over to you.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. As it stated, yes, I work at the Ministry of Fisheries and Water Resources, and we did receive a grant from the GCF Green Climate Fund on the project Climate Resilient Fishery Livelihood Improvement Project. the project commonly known in the Gambia as ProRefis the Gambia. It's a 6-year project, and it's about 25 million US dollar. And then Green Climate Fund and FAO and the Gambia government. Gambia government is putting counterpart contribution. Yes, amounted to around 8 million US dollar. So the project is currently being implemented by the FAO. The Gambia government is collaborating with the Food and Agriculture Organization, Gambia office, to manage the project. And we are happy with what is currently happening pertaining to the project. The project is to benefit about 167,000 individuals participating in the fisheries sector. Yeah, and then mostly women, that is mostly around 52.4% beneficiaries are women. You know, if you look at this current situation in the country, the women participate more in the fisheries sector. And then with the climate change monies, they are affected, their livelihoods are affected. So, apart from that, let me just highlight on some of the areas that the project is addressing before I come to your question. Is enhancing resilience to climate change, sustainable aquaculture, improve fisheries infrastructure, that is artisanal fisheries infrastructure, and habitat restoration. Coming to your question, transforming aquatic food systems, the first challenge is that the project is going to address and is currently addressing is addressing the poor infrastructure, the low quality fingerlings, and limited technical skills that we are our fisheries sector in the Gambia is currently encountering. You know, there is low fingerlings availability, so aquaculture production is usually hampered. But with the interventions of the project, construction of fish tanks, fish ponds, and promotion of oyster and cockle culture is currently on track. And then communities that are affected by climate change being introduced to those type of issues such as cockle culture and oyster in order to for them at least to gain some form of livelihood. Yeah. Another important point that I want to also emphasize is the project is going to also operationalize our national hatchery. We have a national hatchery located at the Central River region of the country, but it's underutilized. Yes, since inception. Although we receive funding sometime from FAO, yes, we'll thank FAO for helping us on that. But we realize that the fingerlings that are being produced are not at the level that we want, and then the project is going to intervene on that to increase the level of and then the productivity of the fingerlings, so that it will be utilized nationwide in order to support aquaculture production in the country. Introduction of climate-proof fish processing infrastructure also is on track. Yes, initially, if you look at Gambia, in most of our landing sites, the women that do this fish drying and others use outdated mode of drying, and sometimes it results to health hazards. So with the coming of this project, solar dryers with improved ovens, new techniques are being introduced in order to help them gain some form of income, and then secondly, with their health, definitely, because most of them do end up having health issues, yes. So, sorry. On biodiversity conservation and community resilience, the restoration of mangrove ecosystem is also on track. Planting of 1,100 hectares and supporting natural regeneration of 1,250 hectares is also to be carried out. It has already started with the project, and then we believe if that is completed, coupled with what other projects are doing with regards to mangroves, is going to restore most of our lost ecosystem. affected by the climate change menace. Yes, and then promote biodiversity, improve aquaculture species habitats. Aquatic species habitats. It will improve aquatic species habitats and reduce firewood use with climate smart processing units. Yes. Also, last and but not the least, capacity building. Government, with the counterpart contribution of government, capacity building is being also done on ecosystem monitoring and management. Government is putting in place measures to train people, especially around the coast and inland, on ecosystem management, in order at least for them to know the importance of the ecosystem and how it should be maintained. Okay, thank you. That's what I...
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Dabo, for that account of all the work that's going on in Zambia. I particularly appreciated how hard you're working to ensure that women, their livelihoods benefit from this programming because they are so affected and they play such an important role in aquaculture in Zambia. And all you're doing as well to restore mangroves. So this is a really fantastic example of solutions that are being implemented that address all these different outcomes that are important for food systems, from climate change to biodiversity to livelihoods to food security. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. I'm now going to come to you, Nancy, and I would like you to please give us some insights into successful nutrition interventions in terrestrial and aquatic food systems at the national level, and particularly how these interventions align with international climate, biodiversity and nutrition goals, and what lessons can be applied more broadly. Quite an extensive question. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity this morning. I'd like to just start by saying the question is about what is happening in nutrition programming that is having an impact at national level. And we actually have a challenge here because we have a lack of data on empirical data on the impact of interventions that have this dual impact on climate and nutrition. And this is really due to the fact that until quite recently, nutrition and climate have been considered almost exclusively independently of each other. And this is actually reflective of what Ollie mentioned at the beginning, the reasoning behind the initiation of this initiative on climate action and nutrition, which was a flagship initiative of the COP27 Egyptian presidency. We at FAO are partnering with the Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition, with the Scaling Up Nutrition Movement, with the UN Nutrition Secretariat, with the WHO, with other UN agencies, with other NGOs and other actors to try to bring together these two agendas around climate and nutrition so that we can have more of that empirical evidence at the national level of the dual impact of different initiatives going on and addressing both climate and nutrition and how that impacts as well biodiversity. However, one of the first things that we did as part of this ICANN initiative, in addition to a paper that was led by GAIN looking at this lack of integration, actually quantifying what that means in terms of commitment, policy, and action, we also looked at the potential of nutrition actions for having that dual benefit to climate and found just a plethora of evidence out there of that potential. And that is also reflected in a lot of the work that FAO does on the ground. My esteemed colleague from the Gambia has already mentioned some work that FAO is doing with the Gambian government and fisheries in that regard. But we have a number of other projects that I can draw some examples from that are lessons that we intend to take to scale when we have more of the evidence from these initiatives that can help drive the commitment and then the financing behind these potential dual impact initiatives. A couple of lessons that we can pull is the importance of gender transformation, and I think that was also reflected in your remarks as well. But one example example, very specifically around that, comes from South Sudan, where FAO has been working with partners, local authorities, and UNICEF to implement action targeted for gender transformative action in women's economic empowerment. And now, why did I separate those two things out? Because part of this is working also with men and communities for an acceptance of this women's economic empowerment, because we sometimes see a pushback against that, actually, to get quite frank. But with our partnering with UNICEF, this is targeting families whose children have been identified as malnourished. Those families who are identified as malnourished are families that are in vulnerable situations for the negative impact of climate change. And so the intervention includes inputs for small-scale agriculture, both small ruminant and a diversity of crops that can be resilient and can provide economic livelihood opportunities, and again, targeting to women. We are currently gathering some information on the nutritional impact, but we've already seen impact in both the economics and the availability of diversified foods in these communities. So that's one example that if we can take that type of action to scale, there's so much potential there for biodiversity, climate, and nutrition impact. A second quick example is, again, from aquatic foods. FAO has, for several years now, been working within school food and nutrition for the integration of aquatic food products into school food and nutrition. Aquatic food products very high in protein, very high in essential amino acids, very high in a diversity of vitamins and minerals as well. We often think of fish and protein, but it's not just protein, it goes beyond that. But a lot of these different initiatives, Honduras, Peru, a few other countries that are escaping me, Angola, Ghana, Malawi, we've worked with local communities, local SMEs to take fish and parts of fish that aren't always consumed, transform that into fish powder that can be integrated into recipes, and then amplify the nutritional value of those meals, provide a stable market for the small producers and small entrepreneurs, and also reduce food loss and waste. So we're having these dual impacts in the school environment. What we're missing there is the data on those knock-on effects. What is that positive benefit beyond the school? How far is that reaching? How impactful can that be? And how can that impact those climate biodiversity goals at the national level? And so there's a lot out there, a lot of examples. I've just pulled two really quickly. But again, through the Initiative on Climate Action and Nutrition, through our work here at the Climate COPs, our work at the Biodiversity COP, we are trying to bring together these examples so that we have enough evidence to really influence how we are thinking about approaching the integration of food into some of these important documents, because it has dual and multiple benefits and we need to leverage those.
Thank you so much, Nancy. It's been fabulous to hear about how FAO and GAIN are collaborating through the Initiative on Climate and Nutrition to really address that lack of data, particularly on the impact of climate interventions when it comes to nutrition, and bridging those two important areas. And also to hear from you on the examples in South Sudan and your example with fish powder. I think that's fantastic, how you can transform uneaten food that would otherwise go to waste and really deliver improved nutrition in an innovative way, working with SMEs. So thank you so much for that. I'm now going to come to you, Jong-Soo, and you're here to tell us a little bit more about the work that you're doing at the International Rice Research Institute. So based on your experience in agri-food research, particularly with integrated systems like rice and fish farming, please can you tell us about how these approaches contribute to building more resilient and sustainable food systems? And could you share some concrete examples, including your work on the rice fish project in Myanmar, to illustrate how these practices address climate change impacts and deliver benefits for biodiversity conservation? Over to you.
Okay, thank you, Joanna. So good morning. So my name is Jong-soo, and I'm a EDHR director. So I have been working for Mekong Delta area 12 years. So let me just take an example of the rice fish project in Myanmar. So project name is very simple, rice fish. So everybody can easily understand. So we produce rice and the fish together. So, and why we should do that? Because if we use the land and small pond together, so we can increase the productivity. So you can produce the two things of the food, and then you can eat or sell the fish, and then this is another income source for the farmers. So the objective is kind of the productivity and kind of the improvement of livelihood of the farmers. So we started like that. But time goes by, so we realized there is another kinds of benefit. Because once you use agrochemical, like the general way, conventional way, you can kill all the fishes. So that means you have to be very careful about the spraying of the agrochemical when you grow fish together. So normally in the developing areas there, Mekong Deltas, they do not have the enough finance to buy the very registered and certified agrochemical. So normally it's very cheap one from unregistered and from China. So it's very toxic. So that's why to save the fish, and then we have the guidelines. So do not spray this period, and then use the organic things and something like that. So that's why we see is incredible amount of the reduction of the pesticides, and at the same time, if you just grow the chemical, the fertilizer, and you have to do that. So the application of the fertilizer. However, that is also very toxic to the fish. So how you can just manage those kind of fertilizer application method to save the fish and then not to harm the growth of the fish. So that is another research area. So we did work with the wallfish guys, our colleagues, and then we found some solution. So that's why we applied that new innovation to the project. So finally, we got the fish and rice together. And then now, so we review those kind of the outcomes, and now we realize that is really great system for this climate action. You know, because all the methane is coming from the aquabiotic, the situation in the water. So if fish moves in the water, it creates some aeration. So that means provide some oxygen into the water. That's why the reduction of the greenhouse gas emission is there. So it's a really great tool to reduce the mitigation of the greenhouse gas. So that is also one of the great benefit of the rice fish system. And the other one is, if you reduce the application of the fertilizer and pesticide, you can just contribute to the biodiversity and environmental friendly situation. You can save some microorganism and some small insect. It's good for the agriculture and the environment, and still you can save the pollinators, predators. So that's why this is really great. You just increase the potential of the conservation of the environment and the biodiversity. And then small fish, like the traditional fish kinds of things also is a good example. We can keep those things, preserve those kind of the traditional things. So that's why this system gives the additional income for farmers, and it's an opportunity for the greenhouse gas mitigation and the conservation of the biodiversity. This is really truly. Lastly, I'd like to take the example of the small little girl. So the farmers who adopted this system in Myanmar, and then there was a daughter, so very shy little girl, came to us. She told us like this: "Hello, I like fish, but we are poor, no fish. But now I happy because I can eat fish. So that was really touching moment for us. As a scientist, this is a really great memory. So still I have the clear memory of her speech. So, and this is energy for us to do going forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jongsu, for sharing with us all your insights and the inspiration that you've received and the energy from this little girl. So really seeing the positive impact that this project has created. That's amazing. So I'm going to come to you now, Richard, and you're going to bring us a little bit the private sector perspective on this. So could you please explain how companies like Tetra Pak can contribute to transforming the food system for climate and biodiversity benefits while ensuring food security? And how can they make sustainable choices more accessible to consumers? Over to you.
Lovely, thanks Joanna. Good morning everyone, and first of all thanks to my fellow panellists. I always learn so much by sitting at the front as well as the back. So Tetra Pak, I guess most of you have seen Tetra Pak packaging. That is what we are known for. We're present in 160 countries across the world, but we're also very significant in manufacturing food processing equipment. So to turn raw milk into milk that is fit for human consumption, that is shelf stable, that is functional, that delivers those nutritional benefits. We also have a growing business in alternative proteins. So in this part of the world, at least, oat milk, I sometimes hesitate to use the word milk, but oat-derived protein, soy-derived protein, etc. We've got quite a significant program on those things. We see ourselves very much as part of the food chain, as part of the food system. We believe we're part of this hidden middle, which is in plain sight. That's the piece between the farm gate and the consumer. Very many farmers don't actually produce food that you can eat immediately. It has to be processed. It has to be changed. It has to be converted into food that is easily accessible, easily eaten. I think one of the big things that stays with me is when we talk about food system transformation, if we don't have food system transformation, we will not have a food system. And that's straightforwardly because of the climatic effects, the links to biodiversity, the links to nature. But also, if we lose those, we will not have an agriculture. But also, the fact is agriculture needs the rest of the food chain to enable it to deliver. I have the real privilege of sitting on the European Union's, I always call it just the food security group. Basically, it looks at food security. It's been quite a journey, but the complexity of modern food systems is something to behold. And I think during COVID, that was absolutely recognized. My own industry, packaging, was very quickly recognized as an essential industry to be able to make sure that food could continue through the system to be able to put into supermarkets, to be able to put into shops, and that was clear. We basically, I would say, in terms of sustainable food system transformation, innovate. We are an advanced manufacturer. So one of the innovations I want to flag, and I did flag this yesterday, it's something called One Step. It's a system whereby you can convert milk through UHT processing. Now, that technology in general is fairly old, but the technology that we've innovated reduces CO2 by 38%, reduces electricity consumption by 29%, and reduces water consumption by 41%. It cuts food waste. And if we can cut food waste, of course, that is the really, really huge prize. So the food system, as we all know, 30% of greenhouse gas emissions, a third of that is lost or wasted. I'm amazed actually to when maybe policymakers don't get the importance of this. Food security brings social stability, it brings economic stability, but it also can provide climatic stability by reducing food loss and waste in many, many different ways. And all I've heard today, by the way, is about achieving that, is improving the optimization of what we do, is getting more with less. Because I think that's going to be important going forward as well. One of the other things, and just very briefly to mention, because I know we're a little bit short of time, we also recently launched a our nature ambitions. You might say, well, why is a manufacturing company interested in that? Well, actually, the straightforward reason we are interested in that is because we are part of the food value chain. And if we lose biodiversity, our value chain becomes less resilient, and straightforwardly, we don't want to see that. So in Brazil, we're working on forest restoration schemes. We are working with our customers. We did a very big survey on, a very big piece of work on where in our supply chain, in our food system, water was used. Very little in our facilities, as you would imagine. Mostly in our upstream supply chain, but also by our customers. And we have worked very closely with a few customers on reducing their water consumption. So a company in Thailand, we have worked very significantly with them, and every week we now help them save an Olympic-sized swimming pool of water by applying what we do, because we have some unbelievably skilled engineers, but it's taking what we know and applying it to improve the resilience of the food system. And I think that's where the private sector can really help. One of the challenges, and I did mention this yesterday, and I know there are a couple of people in the audience today who will be very bored now because I'm going to say it again. We can innovate, we can build these systems, but making sure that they get to small and medium-sized enterprises, and around the world, 80% of our customers are small and medium-sized enterprises, and this is where the climate finance can come in to absolutely support them adopting more sustainable systems to process the food, which then increases food security, whether it's nutrition, whether it's accessibility, whether it's affordability, whether it's stability, whether it's utilization. All those components need to be delivered. But at the moment, it's what, 4% of global climate finance goes into agri-food? And I would say very little actually ends up in the hidden middle in that building that processing piece. So to get those SMEs to actually have access to those funds, we need simplified systems of enabling them to get that support. Because if you are going to use a, we heard earlier, if you're in an emerging market and you suddenly have we heard from a guy in Jamaica. He said, "Look, I grow fruit and vegetables. I cannot access this because it would take me weeks and weeks and weeks to get the data that I need to provide to access that small amount of money." So he said, "We don't even try." And we need a better system. We need that standardization of systems for applications for finance, and we need to make it more simple. And as I said yesterday, it is not beyond the wit of man to do that. So that would be my big ask, just to make things better. Standardization and simplification of access to finance for SMEs, because then we can make a real difference. And that's at agricultural level, and it's at processing level.
Thank you so much, Richard, for ending on that powerful note as well, that we really need to empower SMEs to innovate and to be part of this key transition through finance. and also sharing with us about the work that Tetra Pak is doing on innovation to reduce food waste when it comes to milk, but also on forests and water supply in different parts of the world. It's great to see that join up between food, climate, nature, and resilience. So, can everyone please give our fantastic panelists another round of applause? Right, I think now we're going to go to our Q&A session. We've got a luxurious 10 minutes. So any questions from the audience, please, either for our panelists sitting here or our panelists from the first round that we heard. Don't be shy, yes.
Thank you. I have a question for Jong-soo. We know that the integrated systems like rice and fish, they have a lot of benefits. And it's particularly interesting to hear you mention the point of their contribution to climate change mitigation. So can you share more scientific insights into about their mitigation potential? Particularly, I'm interested to know whether can we say confidently now in terms of scientific evidence about the mitigation potential, and what are the practical recommendations to maximize the mitigation potential? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for great questions. Yes, so rice itself, so once you grow rice, and then you can produce it's really big amount of greenhouse gases because of water. Most of methane is coming from the water when the water is in aerobic situation, So that means, so once you control the water very efficiently, you can reduce almost 65% of the methane emission during the rice production. So that's why we call the alternative wet and dry the system. So that means AWD. So once you just combine with the fish farming together, that means you can use water. So because you have some small pond beside to rice field, that's why you can use the water, and the water can in and out easily. And then during the fish, and then as I told you before, fish movement brings more oxygen into the water. That's why that will be the additional, the plus of the mitigation of the greenhouse gas emission. So that's why now we are doing the research with the WIMI, International Water Management Institute, because 10 years ago we started with this project with the World Fish colleagues. Now we are combining with the WIMI, International Water Management Institute. So we are focusing more on this kind of climate action, something like. That's why I'm the program director of ASEAN program. So ASEAN program is the three centers working together to drive the result of the scientific founding, at the same time the scaling up. So this is another good tool. Once we have the combining two systems into one production system, we can have double impact and the plus of the mitigation potential. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Any other questions? Yes, we'll go here first and then over here. Thank you.
Thank you so much for interesting discussion today again. So my question is related to regenerative agriculture practices. So what are the prospects of the regenerative agriculture? So let me share my experience, a brief experience. So I'm working with a company as a consultant, and I have developed some regenerative practices strategy for them. And we integrated the AWD mechanism for the rice production. So interestingly, recently we incorporated the data into the CFT, Cool Farm tool. And we were glad to see the carbon emissions went minus 48%. So minus means that we are not only carbon neutral, without zero emission, but we are absorbing the carbon. So we can claim the carbon credits as well. But the real challenge with the regenerative agriculture practices is unpredictability and unevenness in the yield probability. Sometimes you can have better yield, sometimes you can have some below the average yield. So have you explored regenerative agriculture practices? Because in the EU, I think it has been implemented that the farmers will have to execute 25% on their land, the regenerative practices, something like that. So what are the prospects of the regenerative agriculture?
Thank you for that. So a question on regenerative agriculture. Who was your question for? Yeah, Jongsi, please.
Okay, thank you very much. This is really great point. I think the next week I should go to India for the event, but in Delhi now, air pollution is really serious. The main reason is the burning the rice straw. So that's why the really key point from outside is how we can handle these challenges in Cambodia, Thailand, especially in Vietnam. So that's why we launched the project, Rice Eco Project, supported by the Korean government. So this is how you can use the rice straw after harvest, not to burn, and then just kind of the fertilizer or livestock feeding or handicraft for the youth and the women and the construction materials and those kind of things. How we can recycle those things instead of burning. Yeah. So that's why that project is launched, and now the 5 countries are participating, and then India will be another member next year. So that's why the regenerative, the agriculture is really critically in the rice sector. It's kind of the residue management is the key. So that's why we are doing the research and the kind of development project about that. You are right. So if we reduce the burning of the rice, and then we can significantly improve the air quality and the human health. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing such a practical example as well that's being implemented across a variety of countries. And I think we had a question over here next.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you for the organizers for this wonderful panel. It's a very ambitious panel as well, with I think 10 speakers in 1.5 hours. So I feel a bit sorry for the first 4 panelists. They are now a bit forgotten, but my questions are for the first 2 speakers of this panel. My name is Thijs and I'm working for World Fish in Timor-Leste. And in Timor-Leste, we've been trying to set up a functional aquaculture system for a while now, integrating that as well into school feeding programs. And I would like to invite FAO to come to Timor-Leste as well. It's a small island state where I think a school feeding program can have a massive impact. But what we notice when we try to develop the aquaculture sector in Timor-Leste is that we can have all the inputs, but that in the end a major issue is the market. So how do you deal with that? The esteemed speaker from Gambia was already mentioning there was a hatchery, but it's dysfunctional. Now it's made functional again. So what are the risks when the project stops? How do you mitigate those risks? How do you create a functional system that isn't depending on funding from donors only?
Thank you for that brilliant question. So I'll come to you first. So how do you maintain the benefits of the projects beyond that initial funding period?
Okay, thank you very much for your question. I think your question is very relevant, especially to us. Let's say Africa, Gambia in particular. I think sustainability will come to play here. So what we are doing in the Gambia currently is with Fish, they are also working with the fisheries department, the aquaculture unit division there. Yes, and then on other stakeholders, that is the fisherfolk organizations, so that when the project ends, the hatchery is going to be maintained. We all know because we have had many projects before, and then your problem still it becomes the order of the day. But this time we will try to solve that because that is the talk at ministry level, departmental level. How to, when this project ends after 6 years, how to maintain what they are currently doing, especially the national hatchery. So we'll work on that. Yes, and then we already started doing that. And this will also be a reminder for me when I return home also to try to work on that also. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Just to speak specifically to linking the fisheries to the school food and nutrition, a few things to mention about that is that school food and nutrition programming should be culturally appropriate. So trying to integrate fish or aquaculture products into a school meals program in an environment where fish and aquaculture products aren't consumed is not going to be sustainable post-project delivery. So that's part of the story. Another part of it is the multi-stakeholder co-creation of a school food and nutrition program. So really involving the schools, the students, the parents, the community in developing that type of a program that again can be sustainable after a project closure. Some of the lessons from some FAO examples included piloting initially, getting feedback, and then course correcting so that those schools could become a stable market for the small producers in the local area, because you can't. There's a bi-directional relationship there, and so you can't promise the market if there's no demand, but the demand can't be without the market. So just a few different lessons that we have. So we'd be happy to see how colleagues in Timor-Leste might could engage with that. One final thing is we also like to link school food and nutrition programming with the national school-based dietary guidelines, which should be a driving policy lever, which should really be informing all different types of policies. And right now, we know that at least 65 countries do have fish, seafood, and aquaculture products in their school, in their food-based dietary guidelines that can help inform how those the nutritional value can be integrated into a school food and nutrition program.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Nancy, for bringing us back to the cultural importance of our diets, and also of really looking at food-based dietary guideline implementation. I think this is a critical thing for us all to be thinking about, and can also help ensure the longevity of these solutions that we implement. Right, we're right at time, so I'm about to hand back over to Ollie. But before I do that, please give all our fantastic panelists a round of applause and thank them for their time. Ollie, over to you for the closing remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. It's amazing that we're finishing bang on time. I think that must be credit to the moderator and to the panel indeed for staying in time. If the number of notes I took during that session is anything to go by, it must have been a very rich panel and very much enjoyed by me, I'm sure by others as well. So I won't try to cover in detail everything that we heard, but I just noted down 5 points that will stick with me and that I hope will stick with others too. The first one is just the amazing array of support initiatives that are available to parties, and I think that's cause to be cheerful and optimistic, whether it's the WWF, the FAO, or Mercy for Animals, many others, World Fish, working with governments on their policies and strategies. That can only be a good thing. We hear about duplication of effort, we hear about everyone trying to have their own little area to play and to focus on, but actually we're all playing a role, and I think that that's positive and important. The second thing is we heard about so many different opportunities, from the packaging and the processing solutions right back to the sort of input supply and the hatcheries in the Gambia, and it's a huge range of different intervention areas. And I guess what's hopeful for me is we're here at the UNFCCC, we're here at the COP. It's all about common but differentiated responsibility. It's all about nationally determined nature of interventions. And it really gives me hope to hear that there are so many options for countries, for governments to choose from as they think about where to start, where to prioritize, and what fits their national circumstances. It's great to hear also that we are responsive across that wide range of interventions. The third thing, I think we heard this especially from Zambia and from others as well, we mustn't lose sight of the primary producers in the rural communities, especially marginalized groups. They are the ones that we serve the most. And on a connected point, it's this idea that the subnational planning, we have these conversations at a global level, but when we get down to the subnational level, adaptation doesn't wait. No one is hanging around to see what we discuss, what comes out today and tomorrow. People are taking action already, and that's where we should be focusing, and that's where we should be meeting those communities where they are in the support that we provide and the policies that we shape. And then final point, which gives me some hope, is sometimes someone who is skeptical or concerned about the role of business, forgive me, Richard, but it's so good to hear that there is a business case for a lot of these interventions. Whether it's the small scale producer, whether it's the very, very large business, there's a business case, there's an investment case, there's a commercial case, and we need that if we're going to get anywhere, because that's the only way that we can really mobilize the private sector, which is responsible for the outcomes in our food system, to do what we need it to do. So overall, I found that very hopeful. I was hoping at the beginning that we would have reasons to be cheerful, while maybe this COP hasn't been quite as euphoric as last year, but there is real practical action, tangible reasons to feel hopeful. And I hope you feel the same for the next, whatever it is, 48 hours before we end. So thanks everyone for coming. I think Lindis has gone. Thanks Juliet for organizing. And a final round of applause. Thank you.